All right, so trimming. I made this piece just for you guys on Saturday. And I had it dried, not in the sun, but in my garage, on a plaster bat that absorbs water a little bit and wrapped in plastic. So the outside form is nice and not malleable, okay? The bottom I can touch is not wet, but I can scratch the bottom with my fingernail and still leave a mark, okay? This too there's gonna be a bell curve. It's either gonna be too wet or it's gonna be too dry. And if it's too wet, I'm gonna cut, and because it's drying, there's gonna be inconsistencies in the clay, I'm not gonna be able to cut very evenly. If it's too dry, you're gonna see like powder shooting, and you'll be shaving off like nanomillimeters at a time. You'll find that this is gonna be an arduous process that could be sped up if you trim this earlier. Now, I love to tell you that it's gonna be 3 days and you'll be ready to trim. I don't know. The worst days for me was when it was raining a lot and I had the demo and I'm like, I'm gonna make this on Friday, and it starts storming on Saturday. I'm like, shit, dry. And by some miraculous nature, it's perfectly ready for trimming for the most part. I've also seen it by students saying, hey, Mr. Lee, this has been sitting, Mr. Lee, they say, Joe, it's been sitting for a week. It's still wet. I'm like, it is what it is, my friend. So unfortunately, you're in a situation where you're coming to a studio to trim. So you're gonna say, hey, this is too wet. I was gonna trim today, but I can't. What a waste. I guess you could make some more stuff, right? Or you'll say like, hey, I came here, oh, it's too dry. I have the luxury of walking out to my garage and seeing if it's ready to trim or not. Sorry, folks. All right, so we're gonna take some clay here and we are gonna trim this. So we know, once again, it's ready to trim because the form is not malleable to our touch. You're not touching it and getting wet clay on your fingers, but you're able to still make some sort of scratch on there, okay, with relative ease. Now we gotta center this because everything in ceramics on the wheel needs to be centered. So first thing I would do is use these circles to try to eyeball center, and we're gonna go ahead and test this.
If it isn't too dry, it's done.
It can get bone dry, what they'll call is bone dry. Let's say like you left it sitting for like a month. You're like, oh yes, I'm gonna trim that. And it's just like rock hard. Your call, you won't be able to make a nice foot on it, but you could certainly carve with it, maybe, with your trimming tools and kind of clean it up. At least you may have something to test the glaze on. Okay, so maybe that's worth it, maybe it's not worth it. I had a friend who is from South Africa, and she was a professor there, and she told me, Joe, you need to be really responsible with what you make on the wheel and what you do in ceramics. Because if you look at all the other cultures, you will not see their paintings, you will not see their tapestries, but you will see their ceramic ware, because their ceramic ware will last forever. So the things we put out there, they'll outlive us, they'll outlive our heirs, they'll probably be there for the next generation of whatever life form is here, and they'll study us and go, oh, they made these things, what the hell is this? So decide on your own whether it's something you want to keep or not.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure. I didn't think so until she told me that, and I was like, oh shit. So then comes grad school, where you're just like putzing around, experimenting. Yeah, that's another story. All right, so we are going to center this. Once again, you can eyeball it, and obviously it's not centered, but I need to show you how to center it, so it's good that it's not centered. All right, we're going to take our pin tool, we're going to graze our piece. Bring the pin tool in. The minute it touches, stop bringing it in. Okay? We can see that the line starts about here and goes to about here. And so that's about, that's like 55%, okay? So I wanted to go all the way around, right? I'm going to find the midpoint of where that scratch mark is. I'm going to push that towards the center, and I will test again. All right, same start point. Different endpoint. Now it looks like about 75%. I would say ideally 75% is pretty good. Remember how we kind of push it off? Sometimes we kind of like distort the bottoms. Maybe we're not going to go around all the way. 75 is not bad, but I want more. So I'm going to find the midpoint of this line here. Push it towards center. Let's see. Yes. All right, so I'm going all the way around. I'm happy. Okay. I'm going to take some wadding up clay. Now, we don't want this to be the wet flop pot clay. We want this to be like the kind of out of the bag harder clay. Because we don't want your pot moving. We're going to anchor our pot down. If it's the wet clay, it's going to move all over the place. So like some of the firmer clay is best. Now, you're going to have any range of malleability to your piece. So I do not want you mashing the clay ball into your piece. Rather, compress it into the wheel head. Okay? As you compress it into the wheel head, you'll see that the clay is going to contour your piece. Okay? Hopefully your piece isn't so malleable that's like messing up your pot, in which case I'd say it's probably too wet to be trimming anyways. Okay, so three balls at the minimum. Some people do more, some people do a whole coil. There's all sorts of things, whatever it takes to get this piece nice and anchored there. Okay. And once again, we want to make sure it's nice and level, and maybe even for good measure, just make sure that we're still centered. Okay. Now we are going to use two tools primarily. Yours looks kind of like that, minus this triangle bit. Okay, and that's called a pear trimmer, probably because it looks like a delicious pear, and that's for larger area surfaces. Okay. Your other tool looks something like this, with like a bow tie, a curved bow tie. This is called your ribbon tool, and these are primarily for smaller surfaces that we're going to trim. Right, so I'm going to come in with my larger trimming tool, and I'm going to kind of clean everything up. I have like a little ridge that comes out. I made some lines here. Maybe there's some chunks of clay on the bottom, so I'm going to prep my surface. And I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning that up. And you'll notice that I hold my tool really tight at the end. I don't want it to do this and give it a lot of give, right? If we have a lot of give, it cuts, it may move a lot, you will get like this kind of chattering. It's called chattering, but you'll get like a texture where it like looks wavy. That happens also if the clay is a little bit too wet, but we can avoid it or try to avoid it by holding the tool closer and tighter. So I'm just prepping my area, and what we're going to do is we are going to now go ahead and make our foot ring. The primary reason we're trimming pots, traditionally speaking, pottery is a craft where we're making functional ware, so we don't want to have like these heavy ass mugs. We're reducing the amount of clay that's on the bottom here, and also reducing maybe to some extent the surface area that's coming in contact with your table, so it's not scratching. Okay, so what we're going to do, and I feel like trimming could go the fastest that you usually go. It's not going to be like 100% on you're not full throttling on this thing, but it's generally pretty fast, or you can go faster. That because it's a solid piece now, it's not really delicate. Okay, so I'm going to come in with that edge of my squared piece. I'm going to cut in. And I'm going to make a little ring there. And this ring is for me to know what I'm cutting and what I'm not cutting. Okay, so I'm cutting this stuff right there. Okay, I'm going to come in with the corner again, and I'm going to spiral out to the edge. And a tip there is don't just start cutting, because if you're not in the middle, you'll start spinning around. right? But try to find where you can rest your tool where it's not gonna move. That's closest to center, because if it's here, I'm gonna spin. Okay, so we're gonna go in here, not moving, then start my cut and work my way out to the edge. Okay, and that's my first cut. You'll see there's a spiral. We're gonna go back in with our flat end and remove that excess clay. So first time we're making the spiral cut with the corner, and then we're gonna go flat remove. Okay, now we're gonna repeat that a few times. Now, we typically don't have x-ray vision to know how thick this pot is. So as we're trimming down and cutting and whoops, we punched all the way through. Shit, I'm going this way, or I'm gonna glaze it and put it in my garden, right? So remember pinky width? I know that all my pots are pinky width thick. This is systematic, right? I don't care what you do, pinky, thumb, whatever, other tools, have a system so you know almost always how thick more or less it's gonna be. Now, yes, we're gonna wire it off, we're gonna lose some of that thickness, but it's not gonna be a huge amount if you know how thick it is generally speaking, okay? So I know I'm about this thick. I also know that the width of this is about a third, right? So I know that once the top of my foot is kind of below, or my tool is below that foot, I still know I'm okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut again. Sorry, my allergies are getting the best of me. I've never had allergies until I moved to a house that had a pine tree next to me. Oh. And now I have allergies all the time.
You can see the pollen billowing.
Yeah. Yeah, like looking out the window and this yellow dust cloud goes on, like, And ever since then, I was like, and I didn't know at first because I never got allergies. I'm like, why am I feeling sick? But I don't feel sick. All right, so we cut down. I can see it's about level, so I know I've cut about more or less half of the piece away. I have this kind of edge here that I'm not too happy with. It's not as clean as I'd like. So what I might do is I'm going to come in from the side and cut that way and remove this stuff here.
The main point of this part is to make the vessel lighter weight.
Typically we're cleaning up the bottom of our pieces. It can be rough, it can not be even. We want to make it nice and presentable as well, but a large part of it is reducing weight. You'll notice when, if you have any potter friends, and they go to a place, there's a craft shop, and they look at the pots, they always look at the bottoms. They want to see if the foot's been cut. Now, I've talked to a couple of, like, I guess professional artists, like they're like named artists, and they just like, well, why do we need to do that anyways? So it's kind of like, why not break the system and not do it? I feel like it's a good idea to know how to do it. Your call on whether or not you want to do it. Some people say what they do is they'll take a rib and burnish basically the bottom side of it so it's smoother and it's not carving and scratching things too much. Assumedly they are making their bases thinner so it's not heavy. So it all has to do with construction of your wear. But typically we are talking about reducing weight of your pieces. And,
is it part of a certain like aesthetic tradition? Like this looks more traditional to me versus something like more modern?
There is a huge aesthetic tradition to that, and that's why there's a conversation among potters of the necessity of a foot, right? But I want to show you something. As we do this demo, I'm going to show you the number of things we can do to kind of break that mold a bit, okay? So let me go ahead, I cleaned up the sides, clean this up a little bit more. Okay, so right now, I'm pretty much done. I've made my foot, albeit my foot was wide as shit, it's done, okay? But I did this on purpose because I want to show you that all our cylinders don't need to be like this, okay? So we can come back in, and a simple cut. A simple cut like that makes it just a touch more interesting, right? Because now it's not just square. We can roll over the side if we want to add some curvature to this. It looks different, okay? Now, I also tell you this because as you guys make all your cylinders and look for them on the wear racks, they're going to look the same. If you make all your cylinders straight and they come out with Bisque firing, they're going to look the same. And maybe if you glaze them differently, they'll look different. But for the most part, they're all going to look the same, which is a pain to ask when you're looking for your pot. Like, which one's mine? You're going to look and you're going to look at your names. You know, that's not mine, that's not mine. But if you have like a look, like, oh, that's mine, it might be easier to identify yours and find it. So, on a practical sense, it's so you don't have to spend so much time finding it. On an aesthetic sense, it's just to make it look different and nice. Okay. So another thing I like to do is I like to do something like this. And it gives it kind of like a floating look. And what I did for a couple of pieces is I don't glaze anything. It has the very nude the glaze look. I glaze this bottom area here. So when it's sitting on this table, the color kind of reflects off the table and kind of gives it like a halo. And so that was kind of like a fun thing to do. So we've seen this one cylinder look like 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways to make your cylinder not a boring cylinder. Okay, and that's trimming, all right? Now I could go in and start digging and cutting lines in here and making it a little bit more interesting, but that goes against my aesthetic desires, so I'm not going to do it. But what you could do is you can kind of carve into here and make these little lines and things like this. Okay. Now, the one thing with stoneware, and you could see that the foot ring is slightly over my foot, so I know I can probably cut it a little bit more without basically maybe cutting a thin line along the edge, which may make my foot very unstable and maybe even firing just great. Having that pinky width is huge. Okay, having that system in place is huge. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache because you're not messing up all your pieces. So with stoneware, you'll see down here, we trimmed off some of this bottom part because I had the wire, or sorry, the test lines. And stoneware has sand in it, so as you're trimming it, you'll see it gets a little gritty and leaves these marks, and you don't have that here, but you have it here. And so it doesn't look nice. So one thing you could do is you can get a rib. Do this. You get this a little bit wet, and we're basically going to burnish the sides of this here. And basically, burnishing is a fancy way of just saying polishing, or well, polishing, I guess. And what we're doing is, you can see there's this little bit of slip accumulation here. Slip is liquid clay. That's basically kind of come up because of the water that we added. And we're going to make it very smooth. So we're going to lose some of that texture that's left behind from that trim job. You can do that here as well. You can do it on your foot as well. You just kind of finish off everything, your whole pot, if you like, by burnishing it off so you don't have like these marks. Oh man, these allergies. I promise I'm not sick. And if you get sick, it wasn't me. And I think this kind of really gives it a more polished, finished look for everything.
And you could do it on the sides too, if you like trimmed.
Yeah,
a lot
so
of
if
the
you
side
trimmed
of
a
your-
lot of the sides too, then yeah, to have that more consistent type texture, yeah, burnish all along the sides. Now, hopefully your cylinders are nice and thin and uniform that you don't need to do it too much. Yeah, it's not goal for you, but you know, as it were, it might be necessary to do that. All right, so I have, as I'm finishing these, a little stamp to mark, the maker's mark, is it? And so now we are done. We'll go. Okay. So we can do that at an angle too, we can round it, you can do anything you want, right? But do something to make it interesting. Now, this is done, I would not put this on the Bisque cart right away because it's still pretty moist. If you've seen bone dry pieces, it looks like much more whiter than this, and it's not very cool to the touch. So I would probably put this on the wear cart, maybe drape plastic like this, like I don't really care too much. So it still can dry a little bit, and when it's a lot more bone dry, then take it to the cart and get it processed. Now, we have not talked about processing pieces yet. Let's save that for next week. Okay, we're going to do another trimming demo next week, so we can solidify this concept and process next week. And so let's take that piece through the processing with the measuring and the tabs and the stuff. Okay. Any questions? You guys saw a lot.
So when you smooth this, is this little thin layer of clay which sticks out?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get rid of that?
How can I, so I could do something like this. Take it back on here. And just go back and just give it a little haircut here and there. There. Yeah. I like that. You like that. Or that bothered you.
Yeah, I have that, I've been trimming and taking the classes, so that's the problem, I keep going back to the next. I managed to smooth it out, but then I have that little thing sticking out, then if I,
Okay, so you can go back.
and yeah, it kind of.
And then you go, then now it's like a little rough again. So what I do is just back and forth. So at some point you're gonna have to say it's good enough, but what I might do just at the very end is just take a moist sponge. If you're using porcelain, are you working with porcelain at all? Is anyone in here working with porcelains? Okay, so if you wrap your sponge, so if I wipe it with this, like there'll be like a mark from the texture of the sponge. And porcelain will pick that up because porcelain is really fine. But if you put your sponge in like a nylon sock, like a stocking, yeah. So if you take your stocking off and you put your sponge in there,
Wrong word, stop.
right? I don't see it anymore.
No.
I used to see at the grocery market they had those eggs.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm old. So you put your sock in the stocking and then you can clean it, and that stocking is really super soft. It really minimizes on texture left behind in the sponge. Okay.
A high-level question
Sure.
about just the class in general. Are most of them going to follow this format where there's sort of a demo and then we kind of come in our own to practice more?
So the first few weeks are demo intensive. The first week typically is just the orientation and the cylinder demo. I like to do each demo twice. So this week I would have repeated that cylinder demo and then did a trimming demo. Next week, we'll have a trimming demo, and that's it. Week 4, we'll probably do like a wedging. Week 5, we'll do a glazing. And then week 6 is just me. And the rest of the time when you guys are doing independent practice, I'm just assisting you guys one-to-one.
Okay.
Week 6 is typically the last week of instruction. I like to do one demo where I do something other than a cylinder. So then you go, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna do that, maybe. And then say, okay, 2 of those.
Cool.
All throughout this course, if you have any questions, you have my email, you have my Instagram, you have my videos, reach out to me and ask questions. Text me, you don't have my phone number, but if you email me, you can, or on Instagram Messenger or whatever, you can send me a video of what you're doing. Go, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm having these problems. I can typically troubleshoot through watching a video. Obviously, if you send me a still picture, I ain't gonna be able to tell shit. So please, like something's gotta be moving for me able to tell you what's happening. Yeah, and I would say like in all the sessions that I've taught for the last 3 years here, 2 students have ever really taken me up on that. And yeah, I'm up like at 9 because my kid's young and I sleep with her. And so I'm like answering her questions. So, you know, bombs away with those questions. I love it. Yeah.
Where do we access your YouTube stuff? Just
The email link, the email has a link to it as well as my Instagram username.
Okay.
And I know you said you already follow me on Instagram, so you can send me messages from there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want us to, like, are we only doing cylinders like this, or can we like pull it up to a bowl more? Like,
You know, I'd love to see that you're proficient with this. Most of your forms are going to start with a cylinder. If you can make a cylinder in your sleep, then you can start to make all sorts of things very easily. But your call, your lessons, you paid, and you're kind of in control of what you want to do with the instruction I provide you. If you want to try this stuff, by all means, call me over and say, hey, I want to try this. Is this the right way? Because I'd hate for you to pick up like bad habits. And you're like, oh, this is how I make a this. And it's like, well, now we got to deconstruct that to make it easier, right? So my understanding is that this is beginning, and most of us have not done it. So the cylinder is ultimately the form that you need to master before you get to other things, because everything starts from the cylinder. Yeah.
if it accidentally gets too big, you just start over at this
Your
stage.
call. Your call. You're like, hey, I like this, then keep it. You know, but just remember you didn't mean to do that,
Right.
and that you need to kind of focus a little bit more on the basics at this point. Yeah, and if you've had experience and you've done this course before, or you had wheel throwing with another professor or instructor or teacher or whatever, and you're like, you know what, I've done this, like, I'm really good at the cylinder, I want to learn some other stuff, pull me over. Say, okay, let's do this, can you do this, let's do this, let's see what you're doing. And I'm happy to kind of deviate from what we're doing for this class, if that's not where you're at. Yeah. Right, so I took a lot of time, 2 demos, 1 day is a lot of information to take in. I'll upload this eventually, and you guys have about 40 minutes to work. Don't forget, next class doesn't come in so much later. We have a hand building class, but next class will come in at 7. So you can perceivably stay in here all day long.
The hand building class will be there as well. So
Yeah,
we should go
they'll be
with that.
there. You can be here. They're not going to use the
Oh,
wheels.
that's fine.
Yeah, they're hand building, so they'll use the work table. All right, thank you.
We had a bowl last night.